Yep, for sure.
So, this year, even though we're in this age of passing the football, offensive numbers, fantasy football, defenses seem like they're just killing it this year. Let's do 3 defenses that are overperforming based on what we thought at the beginning of the year, and 3 defenses that are kind of underperforming based on what we thought.
Absolutely. So, obviously the number 1 defense so far this year, especially in the fantasy world, is the Minnesota Vikings. They're actually averaging 19.7 fantasy points per game. And just to give you some perspective, over the last 3 years, the top defense in the league has never been more than 12 fantasy points for the entire season.
Wow.
They're killing it so far. Number 2 and number 3 so far is Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, this last week helped out tremendously with them scoring in the 30s on a standard scoring league with all those interceptions from Fitzpatrick, 8 total turnovers. They're coming in at 14.3, and then a surprising defense that I think a lot of people were on last year for sure, but their team hasn't played so well, but their defense from a fantasy perspective has performed very well. That's the Arizona Cardinals.
Right.
Number 3, tied with the Denver Broncos, both at 12.3 fans.
Okay.
On the bottom side, I've decided to break this down a little bit differently for you, Kyle. I wanted to look at the bottom defenses per position from a fantasy points perspective. So rather than look at overall, what are some defenses that you can take advantage of based off of different positions? This is really a valuable piece of information when you're starting to play in the daily on like FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo. So what I've got, I'm going to give you 4 defenses, the worst defense for each position against quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So leading our charge, which really should come as a surprise given that all of their games have been a shootout. The Atlanta Falcons are actually giving up over 26 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position.
Ouch.
That is the worst in the NFL right now. As far as fantasy points giving up to the running back position, we have the Saints coming in there at the top, giving up the most points at 31.5 fantasy points per game. Should be a surprise there. They can't stop anybody.
No.
The Raiders are actually the team giving up the most points to wideouts so far this season at 32.5 fantasy points per game.
Okay.
And the Detroit Lions are giving up the most points to the tight end position at 17.9.
Ouch, we got to get that fixed. That's rough. I don't like to hear that.
That's how it goes sometimes, my man.
For sure. All right, well, speaking of tight ends, tight ends have kind of been quiet this year. We're not seeing a lot of big numbers so far. Do you kind of maybe see a breakout this week or foresee something changing maybe?
I totally agree with you on that front. There's just hasn't been much, And coming into the season, I'd say, especially for season-long leagues, there's really only 2 guys that most people were really targeting at the tight end position. That would be, obviously, Gronkowski, and then Jordan Reed was expected to have a pretty big season so far, and thus far he hasn't done big. So I hear you on the lack of production for sure. As far as this week is concerned, though, I've got 3 names for you that have really solid matchups, and using the Dirt Cannon's projections for the top 3 tight ends this week on DraftKings. Number 1 projected tight end is Delaney Walker. Obviously, didn't play last week, so we'll have to keep an eye on his injury status throughout the week. But if he plays, he's got a solid matchup. Look for him to have a pretty solid production day. Number 1, most expensive tight end by far on any of the daily fantasy sites. If you've got him in season long, you have to play Greg Olsen against Atlanta. I mentioned the Lions are giving up the most points to tight ends. Atlanta's giving up the second most to tight ends, and they're not far apart. So look for Greg Olsen to have a big day from Camden and get back on track for Carolina. And then a third player that I'd say most of your audience has probably never heard of is Cameron Brady for tight end for Tampa Bay. So Denver, while they caused a lot of havoc, they're undefeated and on a roll. They've actually struggled in the run game and struggled against tight ends. Look for Brady, who's caught 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, to also have a fairly solid game, especially from a fantasy perspective. He'll see 10-plus targets Sunday. And then the last guy I want to give you that I think personally is going to have the best fantasy day, and again, it goes comes back to our matchup against the Lions. But that's Zach Miller.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He's super cheap. Look for him to have a big day.
Yeah, he very well could make Brian Hoyer look like an all-star again on Sunday.
That's going to be a closer game than I think a lot of people believe, but it'll be a high-scoring game.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, we got the age of the young quarterback right now, right? We got Carson Wentz tearing it up. Dak Prescott's doing his thing down in Dallas. Trevor Siemian's turning the corner here in Denver. The way they're performing right now, if you have them, do you ride them out? Do you bench them? Do you play them? Proceed with caution? I mean, I looked at Siemian. He's owned by 2.9% of the leagues on NFL.com, or teams on NFL.com. So, I mean, you got these young guys. Tell us what we should do with these young guys.
Yeah. Let's break down all three. I mean, at the end of the day, Trevor Siemian is definitely a sit and wait kind of guy. I mean, obviously he had a huge week last week. He was the number one fantasy quarterback on the road. It's never been done. And I just don't think Denver's going to really throw the ball a lot. Now the team's progressive later in the season. Denver's got that defense to lean on. I think you got to wait and see. They do have some favorable matchups. They got the Saints. They got Atlanta. They've got Tampa Bay this week. So he's a guy that you might want to sneak into the background and then look to start him kind of in that situational role, depending on the matchup for the week and who obviously your other starter is on your season-long team.
Okay.
Certainly in a daily format, look for him when you have those favorable matchups. Because I think they've got the playmakers outside to justify ownership there. As far as Carson Wentz is concerned, he's a fantasy starter across the board for me in the season-long team. If I've got him, I'm riding him. They're running more and more offense and expanding the offensive workload for Carson Wentz each week. They've averaged more targets at 20-plus yards down the field from week to week. So look for Carson Wentz to continue. I don't think this is an aberration. Obviously, he's had a couple of favorable matchups early on, but I also don't really believe in the NFC East from a defensive perspective. So look for Carson Wentz to have a pretty solid production season. He'll probably finish in the top 12 fantasy quarterbacks overall for the total season.
I like it.
Last with Dak Prescott, I'd say he's playing very well, but from a fantasy perspective, he hasn't really had a whole lot of production. He's definitely a guy you got to wait and see. And quite frankly, we don't even know what's going to happen when Romo comes back. I do know that looking at Dallas's schedule, they've got 5 of the top 10 defenses coming up over their next 7 games.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a guy that, while has looked pretty good so far, look for him to struggle as he gets teams like the Vikings and the Bengals and those type of Baltimore Ravens are coming in. So look for him to struggle a little bit more than he has so far, and certainly I would probably look to avoid him in a fantasy.
Okay. I have to tend to agree with your assessment, pretty much on point. If I had Trevor Siemian, I'm waiting. If I got Carson Wentz, he's playing. And Dak Prescott, hey, you don't even know if he got the job right now because the starter could be coming back, here in a couple weeks. So, yeah, for sure. Let's move on. Here's a positive light. Let's talk about something positive about the Detroit Lions, shall we? Right now, Matthew Stafford's balling out of control. Marvin Jones is balling out of control. Can they keep up this pace?
I think from a fantasy production, they will, because their defense, as we talked about already on a few different topics, their defense is going to struggle, and it's going to be up to Stafford to keep them in games, and Marvin Jones has clearly proven he's the number one wideout for Detroit. Now, Bolden might get some targets down in the red zone, but when it's game time, look for Jones to be huge, and he's still pretty cheap in a daily fantasy environment. I could see him reaching that Antonio Brown, Julio Jones kind of salary here in about 2 to 3 weeks. So take advantage while you can, and look for him to be high ownership this week for sure against Chicago.
Definitely, and that's the only positive thing we can say about the Lions right now. So let's move on to your team.
It's early.
The Falcons. The Falcons beat up on the Saints. They scored a ton of points. They got Coleman involved with the 3 touchdowns. How was the win for you as a fan? And will they now make a push in what seems like an open division?
That's a great question. obviously from a fan's perspective, I might be the only Falcons fan in Colorado. It was awesome to watch. My business partner, he assists on the college format, big LSU fan. He's also a big Saints fan, so we certainly had fun in the first half watching the game, and he moved away towards the end of the game. It was fun for me. Long-term wise for the Falcons, I'll say this. I'm not sold on them yet. Obviously, their defense isn't much better than the Saints defense. We talked about them giving up a ton of fantasy points. Fortunately, right now, Matt Ryan's playing pretty lights out, and they do have several playmakers. Having Coleman getting involved, is going to help Freeman, in the long run, because Freeman's just not built to withstand that type of pounding throughout the whole season. So, then if they can continue to do that, be strategic in their offensive production, and get a couple stops on defense, I agree. The NFC South isn't very good. I also, Carolina's played two of the best defenses in the league out of their first three games. So I get carried away with Carolina. I think they're going to be a solid team. They're not going to lose very many more games. So tough matchup this week for Falcons versus Carolina. At least we get them at home.
Right.
We'll see what happens this week. If Atlanta can pull out a win against Carolina, that'll be a big statement for the NFC South for sure.
For sure, I agree. I was going to bring up your quarterback and him falling out of the way on the block, but we'll leave that story alone. People have torn him up enough about that.
Man, he did the right thing.
He really did. A guy that big running at you full speed, you're not ready for it. Get out of the way. So I got to bring this up. Real Deal Sports Talk, our fantasy league. We went against you guys this weekend, and my team just exploded this weekend.
It sure did.
I mean, it looked like almost everybody scored 18 points this weekend for me. I have to say, I used the dirtcannon.com, guys. I went out there and I scored
Well, it certainly worked for you. You got 160 fantasy points in a standard scoring league, so that's pretty amazing.
I'm saying,
that's pretty good.
I don't expect to ride that out. Right, I don't expect to ride that out all season, but that was...
Get that every week. You'll beat most folks, that's for sure. Make sure my guys are playing. I won't leave Delaney Walker in next time for 0, huh?
Right, yeah, I saw that and I went, they forgot to change their lineup. But then I see... Yeah, that was something else for sure. But it was fun to watch. It was fun to see, and I hope my team can pick up some points again this week. I will be checking my lineup on the dirtcannon.com and trying to work it out again, and you guys should too. I mean, Jeremy's sitting here breaking down the picks, giving you the knowledge. All you got to do is use it. Check out the dirtcannon.com.
Reach out to us. You can contact us through the website. We're here to help, guys. So for sure, anything we can do, any questions you guys have, I've got a team of experts that work around the clock. So certainly let us know.
And remember, they're a local company here in Colorado. You got to support the local companies. So definitely check them out. Jeremy, thanks for calling in this week. We'll talk to you next week, all right?
All right, sounds good, my man. Have a great week.
All right, you too, buddy.
All right, thanks.
All right, when we come back from the break, we will have the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll break down some other sports topics, and we'll get real at the end of this show. Hey guys, the NFL is back. It's time to win some cash playing fantasy football. TheDirtCannon.com is a local company that has your back. They have produced over 60% winners on FanDuel, DraftKings, and now even Yahoo. TheDirtCannon.com will help you build, play, and win. Build a better team with TheDirtCannon.com. Use promo code RDST and get $5 off forever. And try the silver membership this week for free. Visit TheDirtCannon.com. I'm telling you guys, you need to check out TheDirtCannon.com. They'll help you win your daily leagues. They'll help you win your year-long leagues. And like we were just talking about with Jeremy there, in a standard scoring league, I was able to score 160 points this week. So check them out. They're local. Support the local businesses. I mean, that's what it's all about. So you know what time it is. It's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, the good. We talked about this a little bit there with Jeremy. The good